Hello everyone. Over the past number of days, there's been quite a significant amount of discussion around the comments made by Simon Harris in relation to the immigration figures in Ireland. Simon Harris stated that the immigration is too high in Ireland. Now, these comments have been followed up by Micheál Martin, who said that 80% of those claiming international protection are refused at first appeal. So his contention is that 80% are economic migrants. Of course, this is no news to anyone who's been listening to my videos for a significant period of time and to the reality of what's taken place in Ireland. Now, he said that he would not rule out sending those who have failed in their international protection applications to a third country in terms of a form of deportation hubs. Now, this is nothing new either, because this was back in a press briefing by the Department of Justice back in March of 2025 around looking at a third country for people to be sent to. Now, this is important because over the last number of weeks we've seen massive pressure building on the Irish government. Of course, between Simon Harris has faced his own pressures, and Micheál Martin most recently in terms of could be facing a no confidence motion over the next number of weeks within his own party. And at the same time, it comes in the backlash of the massive protests around the mass immigration agenda, and also the most recent Spoil the Vote campaign that led to over 13% of people spoiling their ballot in the recent presidential, inverted commas, election. Of course, this was an organic grassroots movement led by ordinary people who saw the whole anti-democratic nature of what's taken place across Ireland in the context of the presidential election. Now, this is really about setting the stage and setting the scene for the introduction of the European Union Migration and Asylum Pact. Now, we spoke in a video a number of days ago about this in relation to what Simon Harris's comments were, so you can look back on that video for context on the nonsense that he is spinning. But really what's important is around the EU Migration and Asylum Pact is so the European Union can speak with one voice. And this has been pushed by the European People's Party for a significant number of years. And of course, the government voted in the European Union Migration and Asylum Pact last year in Dáil Éireann. Now, this comprises of 7 legislative instruments which were brought forward on the 31st of July in 2024, which would strengthen and align key European Union policies on migration, asylum and integration. Now, of course, this is going to be transposed into Irish law by the middle of 2026 in the context of the International Protection Act, which recently is going to be updated, and the heads of bills will be soon ready to push forward to get them enacted by the middle of 2026. Now, this includes a number of components, including the Reception Conditions Directive, which requires and ensures that minimum standards of assistance and adequate standards of living are addressed and met by the Irish state, and includes a qualification regulation, which will mean a harmonisation and a convergence of asylum practices across the European Union. It also includes the Asylum Procedure Regulation and a Resettlement Regulation, which means that there are safe and legal pathways from non-EU countries across into the European Union and Ireland. And of course, there's an Asylum and Migration Management Regulation, which is important, which means that the Dublin III regulation is to be replaced to prevent secondary movements. So this is an important change to the Dublin III regulation, and it's tied in terms of security. And also what's very, very important and revealing around this is the Eurodac regulation, which means that there will be an overhaul of the asylum and migration database to make it a complete database, which will include everybody in the European Union, of those claiming international protection, economic migrants, and also those claiming temporary protection directives. Most recently, over 115,000 Ukrainians have come to Ireland under the beneficiaries of the temporary protection directive, which again, the Irish government have been just too happy to support and opt into. Now this would include biometric data and digital ID, and they would ensure faster procedures. So here we go, digital identification as part of the European Union Migration and Asylum Pact. And there's also a crisis and force majeure regulation, which would mean financial contributions and a form of solidarity fund, which would be in place as well. So you'll have your bureaucrats in Brussels dictating how many immigrants should come in to Ireland. So another massive ceding and erosion of Irish sovereignty. And really what's important here is that back in 2024, Ireland applied for tailored expertise on the introduction of the Common Implementation Plan. So they actually looked for funding with other countries and supports around implementing this plan. So this has always been in train. It's nothing new following the comments from Harris and Martin. This was always part of the agenda. They've also looked for a technical support instrument, which would include up to 67 million euros worth of funding in terms of ensuring the legislation is in place. Now, this went back to 2021, including the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, which is going to be due to be extended to 2027. And this would include the changing of the name of the department recently. We know that in Ireland, where the changing of the name of the Department of Justice included the words Home Affairs and Migration. This ties in with the European Union in terms of their offices in Brussels, which is the Director General of Migration and Home Affairs. So, a little offshoot here in Ireland for the head office in Brussels. And of course, at the same time, part of this department's increase in numbers of staff, they're going to run two parallel systems until they get the European Union Migration and Asylum Pact up and running. And there's also 25 million dedicated to improving the digital systems. Isn't that interesting? To ensure end-to-end international protection system in Ireland. And of course they will have designated reception centres. Of course Roderick O'Gorman was trying to push this in a number of years ago. It's been echoed by Jim O'Callaghan. All part of the bigger plan. Of course there's nothing new here to anybody who's aware of what's taking place, but it's important to be fully aware of these comments made by Martin and Harris in the context of the recent pressures that have come on them. And as well, there's a digital ID system in place across the Eurodac system. This is also part of what's happening across Europe, the move towards digital ID wallet, digital travel apps, and an entry and exit system plan in terms of the digital ID. So this is what's in train through the European Union Asylum and Migration Pact, which is due to be transposed into Irish legislation. Like 70% of legislation transposed comes from the European Commission. It's not introduced by Irish politicians working in the interests of the people of Ireland. It's interests of the bureaucrats and their masters in Brussels who work for the big corporate interests against the interests of ordinary people. So please share my videos. Thanks for everybody who subscribed. Thanks for everybody who continues to share my videos far and wide, to friends, family members. I'm very